It was a very hot day in Scottsdale, Arizona, back in 2001. A typical October 9th day. Probably 80, 90 degrees somewhere, maybe even close to 100 in Arizona. Always hot in a desert town. But it was one of the most infamous days in American history, and probably the most infamous day in Scottsdale, Arizona history. The day started typical. Kids went to school, Robert went to work, Mary did her thing at work. Everybody came home. And it was Brittany's turn to take Bobby Jr., that was Bobby's son, to gun classes. And Robert William Fisher was taking Brittany Fisher to some awards to win some type of an award at her school. According to eyewitnesses, he seemed a little antsy at the place or whatever they were at the function, at the school function. And he actually had Brittany leave out of there before she was able to get her reward, because he wanted to get back home. So everybody got home, and it was just another typical night in the Fisher house. According to eyewitnesses, I don't know if it was which neighbor it was. It was definitely one neighbor. I don't know if it was more than one. But he heard screaming, a little bit of arguing. It wasn't typical though. He heard that often, and he said he heard Mary scream quite a lot. He never really heard Robert yell too much, but he said Robert was the type of guy that, was sort of a strange character. The type of guy, when you talk to him, you can kind of tell that he's analyzing every single word you're saying, and he pauses for a minute for an answer. Just a different character, and as far as I know, he was always a good man. Up until the early hours of October 10th. And then it was about, I want to say close to 10 a.m., between the hours of 9 a.m. and 10 a.m., there was an explosion that rocked the neighborhood, and it rocked neighborhoods within a 5-10 mile, maybe more radius. Everybody heard the shaking. The Fisher's home absolutely exploded, up in flames. I mean exploded. By the time the fire department got there, the fire was so hot, and the whole house was caught. I mean, the entire house was on fire. There was really nothing they could do, because there was ammo in the Fisher residence, and we kept hearing pops. The police kept hearing pops, they said. We keep hearing popping sounds like, ammo is getting hot and then shooting. So the firemen, nobody could get real close. They don't know how much ammo's there. They don't know what's going on. They have no idea what's going on. But a house exploded in a very nice neighborhood, rather very, very nice neighborhood. I'm gonna say houses were between 300,000 to 700,000-800,000, maybe 1 million in some spots. But anyway, when it happened was October 10th. It was October 10th. And by the time the fire got put out, the police, were wondering what the hell happened here. And they were rummaging through the fire, not the police, but the firemen. They were just going through everything. And they came upon a grisly scene. He first came upon 10-year-old Bobby and 11-year-old Brittany. Both of their throats have been slit by the time it got to the coroner's office, because you couldn't tell at the moment. It just was charred bodies. They were, they just basically, I believe their throats were slit before they died. That's what the medical examiner said. And And when they found Mary Fisher, she was also in her bed with her throat slashed and one gunshot bullet to the back of the head. So, right now, the police don't know what's going on. Robert is nowhere to be found. He is nowhere to be found. He's nowhere in sight. Mary's Range Rover's missing, but Robert's vehicle was there. So, they followed up on a few leads. They weren't, calling Robert a suspect or anything. They did not know what was going on. If they grabbed Robert and murdered his family, if he was tied to some kind of organized crime. They weren't really sure what to think first. All they were saying on the news is, if Robert, please don't be scared. If you could come back and shed some light on this, we would really like to speak with you. We'd like to tell you what's going on. Because Robert was a frequent, avid fisher. He was an avid fisherman, and he camped out a lot. He'd take his dog and jump in his truck, and he'd leave Friday and come back Monday mornings. And that was quite often. That was typical of William Fisher. So, a few days go by, and still no Robert Fisher around. And, and after about a week of investigating, the news media leaked out, the police are looking for Robert William Fisher as a potential lead to this case. They'd really like to talk to him to get to an idea of what happened here. If maybe he knows who did this, where he is, if he's even alive, so, at first, after a while, police started getting the worst possible thoughts. The FBI agents and the detectives already had Robert Fisher as a suspect. They had him in their sights, but they did not want to release that to the news outlet just yet. They just were basically, all they wanted them to say is, Robert, if you're around, please, your family, they're all murdered in your house, and where you at, Robert? Please come back. That's basically what it was. Now, somehow it leaked to a news media, and then one morning, one of the news people said, Robert William Fisher has now been considered a homicide suspect. We're looking at a triple murder here. He is now considered a homicide suspect. And they said that before the police wanted Robert Fisher to know that. And what the lead detective was saying was like, man, we just wanted to wait a few more days. Like, what he was saying is, this guy could have showed up. Like, what the hell happened to my family? What's going on? Because, like I said, he was an avid fisherman, an avid camper, and he'd leave for, days on end. And they were hoping that he might do that. But after it leaked, and the news media posted him all over the internet, he basically disappeared. Now they went and tracked his movements that they could the night of April 9th. He hit an ATM machine, and he drawed out the maximum amount that you can for the day, which is $475. That's the max amount. After that, Robert simply got in Mary's truck and left. And nobody ever seen him or heard from him again. Nobody seen the vehicle. And he took his dog with him. He loved that dog, I hear, more than life itself. But he took his dog with him. 10 days later, they find him in a rural area in Arizona. A very rural area. And just a roadrunner was there. And Mr. Fisher's dog was still around the car. He was just, he was a good dog. He just stayed by the car. And, if you train dogs well enough, you could train them to stay. And they will stay there. And they will not leave. I mean, I'm pretty sure he left a couple times, to get something to eat or chase an animal. But for the most part, they found his dog roaming around Mary's vehicle. The vehicle was pretty much clean. They basically found nothing. A couple fingerprints of Robert Fisher's was in the car, which really ain't much to go on, considering he drove that car, so, of course his fingerprints was in it. But what makes, but there's a lot of things that makes no sense. He's obviously the number one suspect, number one murder suspect. This is capital murder. So he knew that they were looking for him. And like that detective said, man, if they would have just waited another few days or a week, he might have showed up. But then again, he might not have, because he got a pretty damn good head start. When he pulled that money out of the ATM, which ain't a lot, back in 2001, and that's Arizona. $450, $60, $70, that's not going to get you far. His bank accounts have never been touched since then. That was the last night his bank accounts were ever touched. That was the last night anybody visually seen Robert Fisher alive. And that wasn't a live witness. That was through camera. Now, before the Range Rover was found, Mary's car was found, there were some people in that area. And they could have sworn they seen a man walking out of the woods as he parked the car there and he was looking for a ride or waiting for a ride. But there was two eyewitnesses that seen him, and that was before they knew what was going on. And they did not know police were looking for Robert Fisher, unbeknownst to them, And that could have been him. It might not have been him, but it could have very well been him. Now, I believe he didn't just park there and ditch it and leave on foot. He had somebody waiting. He was setting himself up a new life, and he erased the old life. He was worried about marriage. I guess Mary threatened a marriage, and Mr. Fisher, when he was a child, he grew up and seen his parents get divorced, and it really affected the boy, like a lot. It really affected him. And he said, that's never going to be me. That will not be me. I do not believe in divorce. So I don't understand people like that. They don't believe in divorce. So they'll just annihilate their whole family because they don't believe in divorce. Does that any logic? Is there any truth to that? Does that make any sense to you people? I don't think it does. But people do that. Instead of getting divorced, they annihilate either their wife, usually not their kids in the case, but in this case, Mr. Fisher slit the throats of his two children while they were in bed asleep, and then he slit the throat of Mary and then shot her in the back of the head. And to me, that shot in the back of the head was like a fuck you shot. Now, he pulled out gas cords and pulled out, turned the gas stove on, had a bunch of gas cans and explosives in the house, and he was just ready. It probably gave him a good, let's see, if he left about 11 midnight and exploded about 8, 9, 10, he had about a good 8, 9, 10 hour jump start. And really longer than that, because they had to investigate, go through the fire and shit, and wait for all the bullets to stop shooting. So that took hours. So Mr. Fisher had close to a full day to start his escape. And some people believe if he escaped. Some people think, he got killed and somebody took him and dumped him in a ditch somewhere. No, I don't think that's the case. But there's a couple strange things to this. He changed the oil that day on his truck, but he took Mary's 4Runner. So that to me right there is a puzzle. That's just a puzzle. I don't understand that logic. But this happened in 2001. Another cold case. Another brutal crime. But we know who the man is. The last video, we didn't know who the man was. This time we know who he is. And it's 2021. And a few months back, it just hit the 20-year mark that Robert William Fisher has been on the lam. And he has still never been seen or caught. I believe in 2006, somebody noticed him in Canada, or thought they noticed him, and I guess he really, really looked like him. I mean, even had features. I mean, even all the way down to the gold that's, the silver that's covering his tooth. I don't know if it was silver or gold filling. In the same exact tooth and everything. It was kind of crazy, but, once they did the DNA and the fingerprint, they realized it wasn't him, and they, when Canadian called, man, the Arizona police were very happy. They're like, oh, we finally got this guy. We got him, and it was not him. And that was the last time that he possibly, it wasn't him that was seen, but the last time Robert Fisher was actually seen, and this might not even have been true, is a couple weeks after he annihilated his entire family. There was a man at the bar, some woman said, and it seemed like he was arguing with some girl, and the girl would go up and order the drinks and hand them to this other man who was kind of in the back with, his hat over his head, like he didn't want to be seen. And the bartender struck that as kind of strange, but they deal with a lot of strange people in them places. So, it's just things like that boggle my mind. I think, because where he went into a secluded wooded area, I mean, there's bears, there's creatures, but he was a very good outdoorsman, and he knew how to live on the lam, as far as I know. But, he, has never been seen again. Some people's theories is he's gone scot-free. He's got ties to, California. He's got ties to, I believe, Utah. And I believe he's got ties to Minnesota. I'm not sure exactly. And people think that he possibly could be in Canada. So, who knows? I just thought it was kind of interesting. If anybody knows Robert Fisher case and you happen to see him, please immediately call the Arizona police or the Arizona FBI. I don't have the number with me, but you guys know what to do. If you don't know who he is, look up Robert William Fisher. There's a big documentary on it. And you will be very, very shocked, people. Very, very sad case. Have a good day.